I want to see more parents being confident in having these conversations and demystifying sex, because that's what really wants to happen. That's what really needs to happen for younger kids. Look what happened from the scriptures with the story of Adam and Eve, and it says you can have everything except that tree. It's curiosity. Why should I not eat that apple? Why? And when you set out on a journey to answer why, if you don't already have someone who has broken down the why to you, you're going to be unstoppable until you discover why for yourself.
We'll begin today's conversation taking our quote from Orlando Batista, a Canadian-American chemist and author. He once said, "The best inheritance a parent can give his children is a few minutes of his time each day." Absolutely spot on. Now let's take our second quote, and this one is from Amber Dusik, a blogger. She once said, "Parenting without a sense of humor is like being an accountant who sucks at math." I agree. All right, our last quote is from Peggy O'Mara. She's also a blogger. She once said that the way we talk to our children becomes their inner voice. Absolutely spot on. All of these quotes definitely are absolutely spot on. So now let's see how they will relate to what we will be discussing today. Warm greetings and welcome to the conversation. We are reaching you from Kaftan's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. I am Nonye-Odeh. Now, someone once said, parenthood is signing your entire peaceful sleep schedule away in exchange for dirty diapers, sticky hands, and caffeine addictions. I'm sure you're smiling at that, right? Parenting strategies have been extensively studied for decades. How you parent your children has a tremendous impact on their future, success, and relationships. Based on research, parenting methods are typically categorized into 4 styles. That's the authoritarian, permissive, neglectful, and authoritative. Now we'll break them down into bits and pieces. First is the authoritarian. Parents who use this approach are rigid disciplinarians. They expect their children to obey without questioning and often harshly punish them when they don't. Now the second is the permissive kind of parents. The permissive kind of parents are overly indulgent. They don't set boundaries, I beg your pardon, or have expectations of their children. Their children tend to have trouble with authority and self-regulations. Now the next is the neglectful or the uninvolved kind of parents. Children of uninvolved or neglectful parents have the worst outcomes. They have low self-esteem, lack of self-control, and are less competent than their peers. And then the last one is the authoritative kind of parents. Children who have authoritative parents grow up to be self-confident and competent. Yes, their parents communicate with them, have high expectations, and express a lot of warmth and affection towards them. And according to research, good parents display the qualities of authoritative parenting style. This style is associated with the best outcome for children. Now let's give you some of the qualities of good parenting. One of them is they express love and affection. Although the vast majority of parents love their children, it is important to express your love for your child equally. Although a lot of people say every parent has a best child, but they keep it as a secret, and I agree. Now the second kind of quality, or the second quality of good parenting, is to set limits. Although it's important to communicate with your child, you are still the parent. Listening to your child or your children doesn't mean you allow them to call the shots. Now the third quality is that you have to manage your own stress. Now a lot of parents are on this table right now. They bring their pressure from work, from school, from business, and download it all on their children or the first person that they come across at home or anywhere. Even some single parents are not left out on this. I understand that it can be really overwhelming sometimes. Trust me, stress is real. But please manage your stress, or learn to manage your stress very well. Now, the next quality is you maintain a good relationship with your child's other parents, especially for single parents. You don't have to disrespect your child's other parent in front of them or allow them to do that. That is so wrong. Now, next quality that we'll talk about is communicate effectively. Good parents talk to and listen to their children, explain the reasons behind their rules and why you are punishing a child, so your child will understand your values. Gone are those days when you just beat children and you don't even tell them the reason why they're being beaten. Now, the next one is be a good role model. Are you asking me where your child learned or pick up a particular character or trait? Check yourself again in that mirror. The child of a lion is definitely a lion, remember. So I say to you again, be a good role model. Now to the next one. That's you should teach responsibly. And next one is also you should be positive. Place more emphasis on what your child is doing right than what they are doing wrong, or what your children is doing wrong, by pointing out good behaviors. That way you'll encourage continued good behaviors in your children. Reacting negatively, criticizing, abusing, or raining all kinds of curses on your child is not healthy at all, or as effective as praising good behaviors. Now, you recall that scandalous video of children pornography that went viral a few days ago and took over the online space. A lot of people became the jury, the judge, and the court martial at the same time. So, on the show today, we will be talking to two beautiful ladies. Evelyn Dan-Epelle, who is Kaftan TV's Analyst, and also joining us via Skype is Henrietta Nonye-Odeh. She is a child advocate, and we'll be talking about quality parenting. Now, we have a lot of things to discuss in the next 15 minutes. So, sit tight, grab your cup of coffee or tea or a glass of freshly brewed juice, or maybe just water works for you. Whatever the case may be, we will get started after this time out. Please join us again. All right, welcome back. If you just joined us, this is The Conversation. We are reaching you from Kaftan's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. Like I told you, we have two beautiful guests today on the show. My first guest here is Evelyn Dan-Epelle. She is Kaftan TV's Analyst. You're welcome to the show.
Thank you, Annabelle.
Great to have you.
Glad to be here.
Likewise. All right, now we have joining us via Skype is Henrietta Nonye-Odeh. She is a child advocate. You're welcome to the show, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you. Now let's start with you, Henrietta. Let's start by getting your thoughts on the Chrisland scandalous child porn video that went viral a few days ago. How did that news come to you as a child advocate?
Okay. I read about it on Vanguard newspaper, and it was sad because it showed how parents fail their children these days. Because it was not like those children were left on their own. There was no guidance whatsoever. They did whatever they wanted to do. They were at liberty to be with their phones, the internet. No monitoring whatsoever. They did as they pleased. It was not like the children were raising themselves. It was like the parents were not just there for them, or they left them to the care of others. For the girl, I believe she may have been exposed to sexual predators when she was a young girl. I believe she was exposed to many things her parents might not be aware of, because it was disheartening just hearing and reading all the things he said she did in the video. It was sad. It was sad to hear. I wasn't happy, and I was appalled that adults were accusing her and blaming her for her actions. If anything, the boys, the girls, none of them should be blamed. They did not do anything. The parents are at fault. The parents are at fault. The parents were the ones that failed them. The parents failed their children. The children are not to be blamed because every parent's duty is to take care of their children. And if they failed in that aspect, the child or the children should not be blamed.
Now, here you say that it's actually the parents' fault, but a lot of people would say that taking or parenting children, 21st century kind of children, it's very difficult. So some people have blamed it on the parents, some people have blamed it on the children. So, but let's leave that aside. We'll definitely come back to that. So some people have blamed the school also for not putting the necessary security measures in place to forestall such acts, even though the school has countered those allegations and said if they had put too much restraints, the child will report it as bully. So some have blamed it on parental upbringing, like you also said, that is the fault of the parents. Others say it is the fault of the school. Others blame it on the government policies, maybe the Ministry of Education and all. And some say it is the advent of technology, use of or exposure to high-tech phones and gadgets. What are your thoughts on all of this?
That we have high-tech phone and the internet is widely spread, everybody's using the internet, doesn't mean a parent cannot monitor their children's usage of the internet. What is a teenage child doing with an Android phone unmonitored? For hours. I heard she's on a social media app and she has a lot of followers and she posts erotic videos. So I'm wondering where were her parents when she was creating a profile? Is it that they were not monitoring her, they were not checking her phones, they just let her do whatever she wanted to do for the boys? So in as much, yes, the school itself has its fault. I'm not going to talk about the school right now. I am concentrating on the parents because they are the ones that gave birth to the girl, all the children. So they have a greater percentage of the blame because I believe if that child was well guided, if that child, her parents had time for her or had time for them, both her and the boy, they would have noticed when something was going wrong. They would have noticed changes in her behavior. They would have noticed different things happening, but they got to notice too late, which means they were not even checking in the first place. They just let her live her life. For the school, I've had different things. This is not the first time I'm hearing something like this happen with that school. I've heard a teacher raping a 2-year-old child some years back. That same school. So I don't know. The school itself, why things like this always comes up. There were always issues with this school. I've had different things. When you come to the school, this same school, I've had different things. I don't want to go deep into the school, but I believe every parent's duty, every parent has a responsibility towards their child. In as much as the society has a part to play, in as much as the school has a part to play, the greatest percentage is on the parent. So it's the parent I'm going to be talking about fully today because I believe every parent has the greater blame because they are the ones that birth the child. They are the ones with the child. They are the ones closer to the child. Somebody else will not help you raise your child. You alone has the greater percentage. So the work is on the parents. So it's the parents that I'm going to concentrate on.
All right, then we'll come back to you. Now, let's talk to you. I know that you are an educationist. That's like your forte. So a lot of people would say that technology, children of nowadays, they need technology for their assignments and all. But then some parents will say that, what has my 16, in fact, from 6 to 16-year-old child got to do with an iPhone or an high-tech phone or gadget? So, and then some other parents will say it is the things that we see nowadays. And then some will say, okay, if I have to give my child a phone, it should be my phone so I can check what they do, not allow them to do things on phones uncensored or unchecked. What are your thoughts on this?
Technology itself is not a bad thing. It's the use of technology and even the various applications of technology that can potentially become bad or negative. Because while we're reporting about students from Christland and a sex tape and the use of mobile devices, we'll come back to that, we still have young children of that age being reported online for doing genius acts, you know, coming up with something. I'm sure you've heard some genius acts of kids that are 10, 11, 9 online, and such genius acts were as a result of their early exposure to technology and the ability for their parents to foster some kind of learning environment for them to use technology for good. Because technology itself is not a bad thing. It's the use of technology that can potentially become bad. In the case of this Christland School incident, in a way, when I started reflecting on it after I read feedback, especially on Twitter, I started to see how even the use of technology and the introduction of technology in this bigger picture is good, or was a good thing for society, because it's as a result of the presence of technology in that environment that we're having this conversation today, that the conversation is even ongoing. I keep seeing children of nowadays, parenting and all of that, but if you look back at the history of subculture and young people growing on to become older people, I mean, I want to think that there was a time you were 10 and I was 10. And I want to reason as the 10-year-old me, and I start to ask myself, to what extent am I different from those kids, or was I different from those kids? And what are some of the variables that we can say prevented me from some of those juvenile delinquencies? When I reflect on it, it was the parenting method, the perspective and the approach to which both my parents and the environment and what I was taking in was teaching me these things. Our society tends to be very reactive, not proactive. We're always looking to punish kids. We're always looking for them to flaw, and then we react. But if we can flip that around and be more proactive, for example, understand that if 10-year-olds have been exposed to pornography, or if they've been exposed to sex, as per your conversations with your kid, you realize that this kid has, quote unquote, lost his or her innocence. I think the right approach would be to have that adult conversation, which we all know and we can all agree that would be useful in the development of the child, because eventually a child would become an adult. So I want to see more parents being confident in having these conversations and demystifying sex, because that's what really wants to happen. That's what really needs to happen for younger kids. Look what happened from the scriptures with the story of Adam and Eve, and it says you can have everything except that tree. It's curiosity. Why should I not eat that apple? Why? And when you set out on a journey to answer why, if you don't already have someone who has broken down the why to you, you're going to be unstoppable until you discover why for yourself.
So I hear you say parents, the style of parenting that actually differs from your when you were 10-year-old with what you have at the moment. Now, a lot of people have comments keep coming in from all that transpired, and then some people say, oh, it's children of nowadays, the children of 21st century and all that. Because then, like you said, when you were 10-year-old, I remember my own time. I dare not ask my mom or tell my mom that I have a guy I'm crushing on. Like, who? How? And then, in fact, at some point, I started remembering some things. Like when my mom was even chasing men away till I got to 16. But somehow it doesn't happen these days again. So that's why some parents will say, okay, maybe there's the kind of parenting that they got in their time and what you're seeing now. Some people are asking, okay, we had a particular actress asking, is it okay to beat the child, to scold the child, or just keep talking? Which one works?
That's why I said we're reactive. Beating is reactive. How about we focus on strategies that would put us in a position where we're not beating anybody?
But those days they were beating us, and then somehow our behaviors were well put together.
Do you think it was the beating? Was it the beating, or was it the realization of what you had done that helped you conform in future? Was it really the beating? In my experience, it wasn't the beating. You know, it was the realization. You know, when you have to speak to a child, the biggest problem that I have found in my experience communicating with kids is a lot of adults, and I mean, I can speak boldly on this as a communications experts as well. There's like a whole lot of research to back this up. A lot of adults do not know that there is something called child language. There's a language that's specifically meant to appeal to the reasoning of children.
Okay.
And until we do the work of actually learning that and even gaining that perspective, we tend to communicate with kids as if they should already know, like they came fully informed from the womb, or as they're growing, they came with some kind of chip, like, don't you already know this? Don't you already know that this is? But you're speaking to a dunce. You're speaking to someone who has absolutely no knowledge of the concept. And you have, I mean, I want to think a lot of adults have good knowledge of what sex is, the implications and all of that. Another thing I wish my parents did for me, now that I am reflecting on it, my parents, my teachers, and those who, quote unquote, raised me. One thing I wish they did for me was not to make out sex to be a terrible thing.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, personally, I feel like I wanted to know that, okay, this is not a terrible thing, but this is something that's super complex. And I need you to know that in order for you to demystify this and understand this and even participate in this, that you have to be older, and that you're definitely going to be older because you keep growing every day. And if you can just be hopeful that when you're older, you can set a target for yourself. And you help kids set target and say, you know what, why don't you just give yourself until you're 20 years old before you experiment with this thing? What do you think?
So it's better you just explain rather than tell them that if you go close to an opposite sex, you just get pregnant.
Yeah, if you go close to
pregnant.
but that's a stupid statement to make, because that's not true. You can go close to somebody and not get pregnant. You know, so when you say that, you've created a false hypothesis that the kid would now test. So why don't you create positive hypothesis that even when they test it, the consequences for testing it. Another thing that I see is it's always good for adults to role play the situation before it happens and do a sort of what if you find yourself in this situation. So you take a kid, like when this Christland school thing happened, every time I meet a young kid who I know, I hear that, I'll see that they've come in contact with this information, like, oh, did you hear what happened in Christland school? The first thing I would ask them, I'll be like, oh, Junior, or whatever his or her name is, I'll be like, if you were in the position of that boy and you were in your hostel, you were asleep, and you wake up and you see that your friends are doing what the Christland school students are doing, what would you do? You know, so when you give them such hypothetical problems to solve, when they find themselves in real life situation, they know what to do. It's just like telling your kid, if someone provokes you, make sure you don't slap him. Go and tell your headmistress. So when he finds himself in that position, he would most likely not fight. He would
But that's
remember.
not, that's like not the kind of training some people got. They got the kind of training that if someone slaps you, slap your own back before coming back to report. Because
Yes.
then if someone beats you up and then you come back to your parent to report, they will beat you up and then tell you to go and beat the person again.
So that's the parenting problem we're talking about.
Ah, okay. So which one works for you? Beating, scolding, or just talking?
I'm very proactive. I think I prefer not even finding myself in that position where I have to beat anybody. And, you know, it's been working for me.
All right, then. Let's go back to Henrietta Nonye-Odeh. All right, let's talk about scolding, beating, scolding, or talking to your children. Which one actually helps to return their brains back to factory setting, like some people would say? Which one works for you?
Children like it when you involve them. And when you scold or beat, you're not involving them. But when you sit and you talk about issues, you ask, okay, why did you do this? I want to understand. Is there a reason for this? You're opening the communication, and the child will tell you, okay, this is why I did this. I did this because you were not there. I did this because I was missing you. You understand why the child did what he did. Then you can then sit and explain why what he did or what she did was wrong, or why it wasn't suitable. You explain, but if the child does anything and your response is to hit, scold, that child just feels, this is my father or my mother. They don't love me. They just want to shut me up. They don't want me to express myself. And one thing with adults is they forget children are children. Children are still learning how to control. Children are not adults. Yes, and sometimes children need repetitions to learn. They don't just pick it up. Okay, because you said don't do this, then they will do it. Sometimes they want to do it. They really want to do it because they have not understood why you said they shouldn't do it. So I think parents should take time to, this is why I said you shouldn't do this. If you go there, it's going to hurt you. If you do this would happen. If the child understands why you're telling him or her not to do it, they will remember, okay, daddy said I should not go there because this will happen or this could happen if I go there. So talking to your child is the best way to reason and make the child understand and follow your guidelines or follow your guidance. So for me, I do not subscribe to physical violence. I do not like parents teaching their children, not teach mine. I don't advise other parents to do the same. It just creates this fear. I remember when I was growing up, and let's say an adult would say, "I would report you to your." That statement alone scared me because I would be like, will daddy listen to me first before he listens to her? Would he believe what she says over me? You know, so that there was that fear. Most Nigerian children then, they feared their parents. It was not more like respect, it was more of fear. Okay, I'm afraid daddy might beat me. This person says this or says that. But I would want to situation where your child, if something like that is told to your child, the child will say, go ahead, go and tell my father, because the child knows no matter what another person tells his or her mother, she, the parents would listen to them. The parents would ask them, okay, what happened? Parents will always ask them before they take action. The parents will not just listen to what that outsider or whoever the person is. The parents would also want to hear from their child. Those days, the Nigerian parents would just react by slapping or hitting the child without asking the child what really happened. So, what you're doing to the child by doing that is saying, I don't trust you. So, if your child is growing and doesn't trust you, how can your child talk to you about things? If your child is in trouble, how will your child reach out to you? First, that trust is not there because the child is like, even if I tell daddy this is what I'm going through, he might not believe me, or he might not even want to help me. He might start blaming me. That's what happens to a lot of people. I would stop.
There, does this parenting style, does it cut across all children? Because now, how do you ensure deliberate parenting when some parents would actually beat or scold their children out of emotions or stress without explaining to the child what he or she has done wrong, like she actually stated? And also, you have, when you have more than one child, you have two or three or more than two children, how do you manage them knowing that each child has their own peculiarities?
Okay, let's say you have two kids,
Yeah.
and one likes watching cartoons, and one likes playing football, and you've been trying to guide that child towards a part, like you're correcting the child, don't do this, this will hurt you, do it, and the child keeps on doing that. You could say, okay, for 3 days this week, you will not play football, or for 3 days this week, you won't watch your favorite cartoon. That child will feel it because these are things that are important to that child. That child loves playing football at a particular time with his friends, and you are stopping that. You're disciplining that child, but you're not using the cane. You're talking to the child, and you're withdrawing things that the child passionately loves. It will help the child reason, okay, dad has always been telling me not to do this, and I have been doing this. So because of this, he's withholding me from playing football with my friends at certain times. You would see that child will likely change. That child will likely stop doing that thing you want him to stop doing.
Okay.
So you don't necessarily have to flog the child for him to stop doing what you want him to stop. You could just use simple the child loves to effect the change you want to see.
I hear some people say that what of for children that are actually stubborn? Some kind of children can be very heady. In fact, I had someone saying that there are some kind of names that if they give to a child, does know that that child is very, very heady. So I'm not going to mention those names now. So does beating or scolding or instilling fear on the child, if it's actually wrong, then how about sparing the rod and spoiling the child? What sense is it making here? Because now you remember that in those days when you go out, when you already know what your mom is going to do to you, you want to run back home because of fear, or she might deliberately decide not to beat the child, but the shout that she's going to shout on you will just make you want to return back home safely for your own sake. And then when you go to your neighbor's house and they ask you if you want to eat, and your mom is standing there, you better look into her inner eyes to be sure that she wants you to eat that food. Sometimes she might even ask you, don't worry, go ahead, don't worry, eat the food. And when you finish eating the food, you will definitely come back home to meet your Waterloo. So if instilling fear on people, on children, never worked, how come some children that grew up in those days, they're well put together?
I wouldn't really say they were well put together. A lot of adults have mental health issues. It's just that they won't come out and tell you, okay, I have mental health issues. It looks like they're well put together, but you don't know how much they cry at night or when they are alone. Most adults are not totally fine. Most adults are going through a lot. Most adults that were raised these days are inflicting the same pain their parents inflicted on them to their children. So I wouldn't really say we adults or adults now are well put together. They are not. It's just a front. A lot of adults are going through things we do not know about. They are going through emotional trauma that they are still healing from up till now. But they won't come out and tell you. It's just a few times you hear maybe somebody that wants to express himself or herself comes out and says, okay, this is what I passed through in my childhood. It did this, it did that. A lot of adults are going through emotional trauma, but I'm expressive about that, anybody. So I won't really say they're well put out. It just seems so, but they're going through a whole lot within themselves. Then for parents who cannot manage their anger, I would say it's as a result of what they passed through in their childhood. Like, parenting is not just about the children, it's also about ourselves. We get to cover ourselves. What are our issues? A lot of parents cannot do without yelling. They must yell at their children. If they don't flog their children, they will yell at them. Those are the same things their parents did to them when they were kids. So you see, it is still affecting them up till now. So they cannot help it, but do the same to their children.
Okay.
If you ask them when they were little, did they like their parents yelling at them? They will tell you they did not like it. So why are they doing it to their children? So most of the parents these days, they have issues from the past they have not resolved. And that is showing in the way they're bringing up their children.
All right. All right, clearly there's a lot to unpack from this conversation, but we'll do that after this timeout. Please join us again.
Then the society can also help. I've seen a lot of adults sharing her pictures and videos on Facebook and different social media apps, and I'm like, to what end? Why would you get a child's picture and post on Facebook? For what? What is your intention?
If you just joined us, this is The Conversation. We are reaching you from Kaftan's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. If you just joined us, you've missed quite a lot because we've been talking about quality parenting, if it is right to scold, flog, or just talk to your children. Our guests are Evelyn Dan-Epelle. She is Kaftan TV's analyst, and then joining us via Skype is Henrietta Nonye-Odeh, who is a child advocate. Now, before we went on that break, we said quite a lot of things. Now, I'd like to ask, did it ever dawn on you, or did you ever have that feeling at some point when you were growing up that maybe your mom or maybe one of your parents never liked you so much because of the kind of treatments that they give to you? Because I've talked to a lot of people and then they feel like, no, my dad likes me. I'm more of my dad's girl. But you see, my mom, she would give. Did you ever grow up having that kind of thoughts?
I think the thoughts and feelings I had every time my parents showed aggression, or was I was always wondering, why is Daddy so angry? Like, what's the matter? What did I do? Because it's like, oh, I'm not going to ask him that. I'm just saying like what my thoughts are, and sometimes I'll conclude that, oh, maybe he had a bad day at work. I'll be like, oh, maybe transfer. Yeah, or maybe, I don't know. I just feel like as a kid, my thoughts were always, what is wrong with this? Why is this one? I can't say it, but that's kind of the thoughts that I would have every time there's anytime there's something like that. My dad was always good at doing my homework with me.
Okay. And,
his approach to teaching me, when he wants to teach me arithmetic, was he would always shout, and I always wonder, like, you're teaching me what I don't know. Why are you shouting? You're trying to teach me.
I can relate.
Exactly. And some parents will go as far as even beating the kid and saying,
and calling them names.
And calling them a lot of names over that. So when you get that kind of treatment, the chances are, just like she rightly said, the chances are you would want to, if you don't question your motives, you would transfer that when you become an adult.
Okay.
So now, because I have I've received enlightenment on the subject, I know that that's not the approach. Maybe that's what he received. But the enlightenment that I have received from that experience, I start questioning my approach. I'm like, okay, my dad would get upset because I got back from school and I didn't observe siesta, I didn't sleep, and he would want to beat me. Why are you beating me to sleep? Sleep is a natural event, it's a naturally occurring event, right? It's not, I don't think sleep is something we should try to force on anybody, not even an adult, but their parents who would beat their children to sleep, and I think that comes from that's archaic cycle, vicious cycle.
Do you think that those archaic vicious cycle, like you call them, did it ever work at any point for some children though?
It worked as a coping mechanism.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so what happens now is if I've received hot slaps on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday over sleeping, I would now learn how to pretend to be asleep. Then in the process of pretending to be asleep, because that's in my experience, that's what I did, because of pretending to be asleep, you eventually fall asleep. Pretending to be asleep creates the conditions for sleep, because now it involves actually lying on the bed, closing my eyes. And even when someone comes and does like this, I'll do like I'm still sleeping. That's where I learned how to act.
Okay. Yes, I can get it. All right, so now now you were able to use that to learn how to sleep and then cope with all of that. So at any point, did you actually feel affected after you grew up? Do you feel like, did it affect your psyche in any way?
Yes, it did. And it shows up in my leadership to the younger groups of persons. I had an experience, speaking of all this Christland events, I have a younger cousin who really, I would want to say, looks up to me in the way that she carries herself and wants to always bring very intimate questions and curiosities that she has to share with me. And one of such really blew my mind, especially in the way that she asked the question directly. And she was still a teenager at the time. And she said to me that, it's just a few months after her 18th birthday. She's still obviously a teenager, but I mean, an acclaimed new adult. And she's saying that, the person she's quote unquote in a relationship with is pressuring her for sex, and she wanted to know my thoughts on this, that, do I think it's okay for her to now actually give her virginity away and things. And first of all, I felt really honored in a way that I had a younger cousin who would even look to me for such an answer. And I knew that whatever I say to her would ultimately become what might or might not define her entire future.
Exactly.
And I was very quick to respond like Jesus, who would always use parables. So it's like, I agreed, but I did not agree. And I said to her that, listen, if you have to come ask me if I think it's okay for you to do this, it's fundamentally because you are not ready. And I said to her that I know you're an adult now, when you arrive at a place where you've checked this person's character, you've checked what this person is offering you, most likely that would look like an environment that's your matrimonial home. When you've considered all of these things put together and it feels like this is the right moment, you wouldn't have to ask me, or you wouldn't have to ask anybody else. So the answer you want from me, she said, just tell me yes or no. I said, just listen to me. If you have to come ask, it's fundamentally because you're not ready. And we had a conversation 5 years later, and I found that she took the right decision, and she made that decision entirely on her own because she figured that she needed more information and she needed to make better decisions by simply just waiting until more information is available.
Okay. So now, do you believe that school of thought that says children that were raised by single parents or children that were raised by grandmothers are the ones that are spoiled and are causing some of this moral decadence in the society?
I don't agree, because I mean, it's not statistically significant. You still see, one of the things I learned last year that blew my mind was the history of former military President Ibrahim Babangida, when I found and learned that this person was orphaned at a very little age, and so grew up, from hand to hand, and ended up being perhaps one of the most influential individuals that we have in this country. And so I started to ask myself, like, oh my God, what's such luck? It's like, I really don't know if I can say that I would be a successful person today if I didn't have my parents. I don't even want to imagine, what that process was like. And yet someone of his quote unquote timber and caliber emerged. So what happened? What happened was he was placed in an environment or in different environments where you had adults who saw potential in him and helped him grow. And that's parenting. That's what parenting is about. It's not really the act of giving birth to a child. And we can see now that that process itself has been automated, if that's the right word. You now have surrogacy. You can pay people to have kids on your behalf. You have the IVF process and all that. That is, less embodiment of an actual pregnancy. And those children that emerge from such circumstances still have to be parented. So how do we explain, whether or not a child would eventually grow up to be successful or would be delinquent because of their background? I think that I maintain that there has to be a broad orientation of responsibilities of all stakeholders that are relevant in the matter of raising children in the society, including parents, including teachers and administrators of institutions that cater to children, including the government and civil society. I feel like if there's a joint effort to build perspective around the fact that we all have to work together. And be more proactive and not reactive and waiting for something to happen so that we can beat. Some adults get a thrill from beating. So they're not even concerned about what has happened, getting to the root cause of the matter and beating. I've had a conversation with a teenager who was caught watching porn. And the first thing I did, I said to him, so this your phone that you like so much, that you use in playing games and all of that. I know what it means to you. We're going to take this phone away from you. And then you take a break. You don't give kids too much at the same time, because when you do that, they get anxious. And anxiety is not good for kids. So you don't give them too much. And after a while, I called him back and I said, do you know why your phone is now nearly permanently seized? Are you aware of what you did? And even why you're going through what you're going through now? Because it's obvious that you're sad that you can't play your games anymore. And what you're doing is building critical thinking and putting that child in a position to think for themselves.
All right.
And get to the root cause of the problem. But when you beat, when you're in a hurry to see the child crying and wailing, and you don't really achieve anything, in my opinion.
All right, let's come back to you, Henrietta. Now, is it true that parents who have waited for a long time before they have a child or children, or maybe they have just one kid, they're the ones that spoil their children more? Do you agree with that school of thought?
I don't. It depends on who the parent is. Depends on the values of the parent involved. I do not believe because you waited to have a child and it took quite a long time. So when you have the child, you just want to spoil the child and all of that. I believe if the personality of the parent involved, the values the parents have, I do not believe it's because of their circumstance to leave their children to be spoiled. It's all about the person, the personality. I do not agree to that. Yes, although there are instances of parents who have more like left their children and properly did not parent their children because they felt this is my only child and it took so long to have you. I will give you everything there is I can provide in the world. So it's all about the values of the person involved or the parents involved.
Before we started, when we were talking about the Christland video that went viral, you said no one is thinking about how much the children will suffer, the girl and other children around there. Now, we know that the internet never forgets. Anything you store in the cloud stays in the cloud. So in all of this, how do you see the child, whether the girl or the boy or the boys or the other children, as the victim? Even though a lot of people have started digging stuff, and like you mentioned before, where they saw that she has other social media pages, that where she have other followers. Some people just say that children and their psyche, that those children and their psyche will definitely be affected regardless. Do you agree? And how?
It depends on what their parents do now. If their parents make the right decision for those children, both the girl and the boy, so everything is determined on the parents, then the society can also help. I've seen a lot of adults sharing her pictures and videos on Facebook and different social media apps, and I'm like, to what end? Why would you get a child's picture and post on Facebook? For what? What is your intention? By now, I felt the parents should have closed the page. That page shouldn't still be up. I'm surprised it's still up and people are going there to get videos, get pictures. The parents should have closed that page long ago. So I'm still surprised whether they have not found out that this page exists, or they have not seen what people are posting. Then for those that are posting it online, what is their... Sometimes I sit and I'm like, we are disturbed. The Nigerians as adults are disturbed, because why are you going to on Facebook or Instagram or whatever social media app? For what purpose? What do you send? What are you aiming to achieve with that? So if the parents, the decisions the parents make can help the girl, the society, we as a whole, coming together can also help this girl. We have to stop people that are posting her pictures and videos online should stop. It shows that they themselves are disturbed, because I see no reason
Sharing.
while a young teenage girl, you're posting a picture of a young teenage. Funny enough, it's still online, and they are saying all sorts about the girl. It's appalling. It's appalling. It's painful. It's heart-wrenching. There were a lot of comments I saw, and I can't even say them here because I'm like an adult. Out.
All right.
So the society and the parents of these children come together. I believe there is chance for them to be happy and alive.
All right, so let's talk about the society. Now, usually they say that it takes a community to train or raise a child. Back in the days, if a neighbor catches you doing something off your age, they will beat you up and report you to your parents, regardless of whether the child decides to greet you again or not. They will definitely report you back to your parents. But now it looks like people don't even bother to do such things again. Instead, they would even start taking pictures and, like you said, throwing them on social media. Also, in some states, there are kind of dressings that you do not wear and then walk around with, because the way people will look at you and insult you, you would definitely want to go back home. Because some people will start asking you, did your parents see you when you were coming out like this, dressed like this? They would wash you from head to toe. But these days, people don't care anymore. So does the society we live in, do they also have a fault in all of this?
They do. Taking, for instance, what happened to these children? They picked the girl. They only picked the girl, and they've been sharing her pictures everywhere, saying all sorts. People were insulting her. Some people forgot she has parents. They're just insulting her. She's this, she's that, she's that. Nobody is thinking about what this girl was exposed to. Nobody. They are not thinking about the trauma she may have gone through. growing up. The act is none of their business. It's like everybody is more like everybody is just selfish these days. Nobody cares for the next person. I'm not saying those days, yes, neighbors would see your child doing something, they will come and tell their parents, yes, I saw your child so place go. And the parents will be like, okay, I'll deal with it. We don't have things like that these days because most parents do not appreciate those kind of things anymore because they'll be like, what's your business? Why are you coming to tell me? Or those days we used to beat children, and a lot of parents do not like people beating their children, so they do not appreciate that. So people tend to mind their business. But even as you mind your business, there is something like it's just children watching BBN. There are a lot of children in Nigeria that watch BBN from as low. So there are neighbors that hear the children watching and laughing. I believe as a concerned neighbor, you can tell the parents, I heard your children watching BBN. Did you allow them and all of that? I think it's bad. I think we should start thinking of the next person. I believe we should all learn to be our brother's keeper, no matter how the world is changing. But I believe being our brother's keeper would really, really help curtail all of this happening these days. Yes.
Just believe that you are a direct or indirect replica of, or your child is a direct or indirect replica of you, your image. If you look at the mirror or whatever traits your child possesses right now, somehow you have an iota of that trait, either while growing up or now as an adult. Because now I remember some time ago when I was in school, my aunt and my mom visited me in school, and then my mom just saw my wardrobe of clothes and then she screamed like, what's happening here? Are you selling them? And then my child just asked, remember, a lion cannot give birth to a dog. So, and then she smiled. So does that narrative, does it work for you too?
That's the cliche thing to say. Okay. And that's where the concept of mini-me came from. I'm sure if you'd be familiar with that, especially on social media. When mothers post their babies, they would say mini-me. And that's skewed thinking is perhaps why we're here today and why we're having this conversation now and, all of these things happening. No child is your mini-me or your exact replica or whatever. What it is biologically, and if we investigate it really, is every child is a completely different human being who is having a completely different experience in this earthly plane that we're on, independent of the experiences of their parents, both father and mother.
Okay.
What has been replicated is the DNA, which is a footprint. That's a footprint that sort of reminds the new of the old, and think of that as, like how technology has evolved. You won't say that iPhone 13 and iPhone 7 are the same. Yes, they are iPhones, we agree, but they are two completely different things that function in different ways, and we can measure and contrast. The expectation is that should be better versions, and we should keep producing and replicating better versions of ourselves. But fundamentally, if we understand that this is a human being who is having a completely different experience, who has a completely different heart and brain and feelings and emotions, the next step would be to try to understand this version.
Okay. And
not using ourselves as a way to understand them. Because yes, I might give birth to a child and this is my child. My child can be, for example, introverted while I'm extroverted. In your case of you having the same character as your mom in terms of clothing, that's superficial. It's on the outside. What I'm referring to is on the inside.
Okay.
We need to stop thinking or forcing the idea that there's some kind of biological would I call it a duplication, you know, a 100% duplication? No.
Okay.
Every human being that comes into this earth is a completely independent individual that does not have the experience of anybody else, of all the billions of people that were already here before him or her arrived. Okay. And when we understand that, we now try to start helping that individual to develop by not forcing our ideas on them, but giving them tools to think for themselves, helping them understand their environment and understand the consequences that come with participating in certain things, just like what happened with the Christian school students.
All right, then. So now let's talk about the too busy to cater kind of parents who are either too busy with work or school or business, and then they delegate parenting to other people to help them cater to their children. So now for those kind of people, how much does it affect the upbringing of the child, and how can such parents be able to cater to their children, cater to the family, still ensure that everything at the home front is well put together while they are still not losing out from school or work or business or whatever the case may be? My question is, how can you have the woman who is the wife, the mom, and still the boss, but yet she can still make sure that everything is check?
That in itself comes with, you know, the experience and worldview of this individual. Remember that all hands are not equal. In my experiencing, parents can become better the more economically stable you are, because some of these frustrations that come and result in bad parenting sometimes comes from the stress and strains of the parents. Let's talk about Nigeria, you know, as a whole, and we see the dwindling socio-economic condition of the country right now. There's a general sense of frustration, and that's frustration can affect parenting. It can affect the way you're responding to kids, because raising kids requires a lot of patience. Now, on your question of outsourcing parenting, luckily, parenting is something that can be outsourced 100%, because parenting skills is something that we can learn. You don't necessarily have to be a good parent to parent well. I've once, as a copper, I used to live in a compound house where you had other flats, and most of my neighbors had kids. And so I took it upon myself to do homework with the children in the compound on weekends, in particular mathematics, because I have a background in engineering. I enjoy solving mathematical problems, and just, you know, also relating with kids. I think they're very hilarious. We crack a lot of jokes.
Okay.
And so I found that through that process that I don't necessarily have to have a kid to parent a kid. You know, because parents would come back and say to me, oh, wow, my kid is doing better at math. How did you do this? How did you explain some of this how did you explain the area of circle versus the circumference of a circle? And I'll be like, oh, I used an orange, you know, and the parents will start to see how they could have done better by using fruits to teach their kids and, you know, appealing to their senses. So it's not about who is raising the kid, you know, whether it's grandmother or uncle. Men even raise kids. I've had an experience of a man whose wife died in labor and left behind 5 other children, and the man literally had to raise 5 children by himself. You know, so to me, it's not about who is doing the raising, it's how the raising is done.
Okay.
You know, because there's a parenting methodology that can be learned. We just need to make ours. Everything I know about parenting right now, I didn't arrive with the information. I learned it along the way.
All right, then let's go back to you, Henrietta. Now, could this also be a problem? Could there be a problem with parenting where you see parents doing, probably like, imagine a father asking the children to disrespect their mom or to beat their mom or vice versa? Or is it the fault of the school? Because now you know that some school definitely send school notebooks of the activities of children, their daily activities. So now when you have to look at all of these problems, is it from the schools not sending these notebooks or from the parents not doing well?
For parents who are abusers, it affects the child. Except the child is taken away from that environment, it affects the child. You cited an example of a man who asks his children to beat their mom. That is an abuser. And his children, if left under or stay in that environment, may become abusers themselves except to get help. So that in its way, it's any man or any woman who is undergoing any form of abuse and is enduring it for the sake of the children is actually doing harm to his children or her children, because at the end of the day, the children will be affected. It's either they become abusers themselves or live with the trauma the rest of their life.
Okay. All right. Finally, on this note, saying that tempers are still high.
Something
so
about doing homework, the school sending homework back.
All right, we'll have to round up. Our time is fast spent. So finally, on this note, you said that tempers are still high. So is it advisable to, is actually advisable to be calm and then find out what best punitive measures suit the affected persons? We're talking about the Christland saga. Now, in your opinion, what is the best way to resolve this impasse on the side of the school, the child or the children, the parents, and even the government?
I believe those children need counseling. They need series of counseling. The parents of these children should learn or try to know what these children were exposed to. They need to understand their children's response, know why their children are doing what or did what they did. They have to look for the root cause of the problem, because until they find the root cause of the problem, they cannot bring out the solution. So they have to look for the root cause of the problem, both for the boys and the girls. For the school itself, I believe there's a lot of responsibility, trust on schools, because you have people are leaving their loved ones with you, so there is a lot of responsibility.
Okay.
It's like parents expect you to be 100% accurate. Like, as long as the children are involved, they need you to be 100%. They do not want to hear stories, or they do not want to give it. They don't want you to give excuses. As for the government, I believe they should start sanctioning schools that have such issues. Just like what happened in the Deeper Life school and the one with the boy that died. There should be serious sanctions.
Okay.
This is not a joke. These are children that are loved. So each should have like strategies to keep them safe, to keep children safe at all times. There is no room for excuses.
All right, then. Thank you so much for that contribution. Now, let's come to you, Evelyn Dan-Epelle. For you, what are your last words to parents? Because now I got a message from social media. I was going to leave that message, but I said, let me quickly take it. He said, someone sent us a message saying that there are children porn sites and OnlyFans for children where pedophiles enjoy watching. So how will you as a parent know of such? Okay, so that's what this person is asking. Even me, I don't even know there's something like OnlyFans until recently. And then they say there are children who have such sites. So what are your advice to this parent? Because there are still children who come home with vehicles, cars, clothes, where they're not doing anything. And then some parents are not even complaining. What are your last words to them?
My advice to parents would be to shift perspective from assuming that we know and children do not know, to focusing more on the fact that we are all learning. You know, there is no expert at this, and at every age you must stay open to learning and doing better. Just like she rightly said, we must also take responsibility. It boils down to taking responsibility. Now, perhaps you don't know about OnlyFans because you haven't had the cause to research that area. But if, say, you're parenting a kid in this day and time and you're looking into creating security on their phone, one of the things you may have come across would be security against pornographic sites, and you would then see examples and be exposed to the fact that there's something called OnlyFans. So it's just to stay ready. My advice to parents would be stay ready, always stay alert, stay open to learning, stay open to evolving, stay open to questioning your parenting skills.
Does stay ready mean that you have to be like an hawk, have your cane on like anything?
No, not your cane. By stay ready, I mean stay open to the fact that these things, the fact that they're not happening to you now, doesn't mean that it wouldn't happen, and that there will be more. Today we're talking about Christland School and sex. Tomorrow we're talking about a kid who would just come back from college and say, "Mommy, Daddy, I'm not going to school anymore. I don't want to go to school again."
That's it.
You know, and that's a very different battle that parents have to fight when you have a kid who rebels against things like going to school. For some kids, it's eating. You know, it's a lot of things. There's some children, what their parents are dealing with is their hyperactivity. They're always playing, you know. So every parent who has one or two things they're dealing with. So my message to parents will be to stay ready, stay open to learning, and to take responsibility.
What a fine place to anchor. Thank you so much for your time with us, Evelyn Dan-Epelle. It's been a wonderful time having this talk with you.
Same here.
And thank you so much for your time with us, Henrietta and Nonye-Odeh. It's been a wonderful time having this talk with you. All right, this is where we draw the curtain on today's episode of The Conversation. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm sure you must have been educated, rightly entertained, and informed. I will definitely see you next time. Keep watching The Conversation because you never know who my next guest or what my next topic will be all about. I'll see you again next time. From the nation's capital, Abuja, I am Nonye-Odeh. God bless Nigeria.